We're joined by Mark McKenzie, who is a presenter for BFBS. Now, BFBS is a service that if you have been a member of the armed forces, as I know the majority of our listeners are veterans of the armed forces, then you'll be familiar with BFBS. It's been around quite a long time now, and it's there to serve anyone who's serving in the armed forces, whether at home or overseas, but particularly important for those that are serving overseas. And they could be anywhere in the world, places like the Falkland Islands, Afghanistan, Iraq, Germany, anywhere else, in fact. You'll be able to find BFBS wherever there's British personnel. So let's find out more about the service right now from one of the presenters. He is Mark McKenzie. He's based in Scotland, and he broadcasts every weekend on the sports show. And he's been with BFBS since 2013, and he joins us on Erskine Veterans Radio right now. Hello, Mark.
Yeah, hi, Ian. Good to be with you.
Tell us about how you got started in this then, because you don't have a military background as such, but nonetheless you've got one through being part of the armed forces by proxy almost, broadcasting to military personnel wherever they may be. Tell us how you got started.
Yeah, I think if you hang around long enough, you probably get accepted, and I think that's my case. My background is I'm a civvy. I admit that to anyone that's serving or has served, just so they know the lay of the land. But I'm delighted that I think I've been accepted within the military community within the UK and further afield. My background is radio. I've been broadcasting since 1990. I wanted to be in the radio when I was 9 years old. It took me a number of years to get into it. So I'm doing my dream job, and genuinely, I've been really, really lucky throughout my career to meet and interview a lot of my childhood heroes and all of that. But I can say hand on heart that every day at BFBS is really, really rewarding, and actually meeting the people that just do what they do, and most of them are really, really humble about what they do, is more rewarding than meeting your idols. For BFBS, as you say, I go back to 2013. Before that, it was Garrison Radio, and you talked about the BFBS reach there. So on a Saturday afternoon, I do the Saturday Sports Show, which is music and sport, and I do it from Dreghorn Barracks in Edinburgh. And the studio, and my first encounter in that studio was with a guard and a drugs cabinet and the med office, the medical centre. So we broadcast from the old med centre, which was basically 2 rooms in Building 19 in Dreghorn Barracks. So when I walked in, there was the guard, drugs cabinet, a bath. It's never come in handy. Thankfully, we've got rid of that. And on Saturdays, I stand there on a broadcast to the Falklands, to Germany, to Gibraltar, to Cyprus, around the UK. And I never ever forget that was where it started. So fascinating. And I think it highlights what BFBS and everything about the forces is. It's able to adapt, and it's able to go with the flow, if you like.
I think as well, similar to perhaps how things have been really in the world over the last year, where so many of our veterans particularly have been cut off from their families, and of course it affects the families as well, but the veterans obviously not being able to have visitors in the usual manner. And I suppose it's similar to being when you're stationed overseas as well, where you're not able to just come and go as freely, particularly if you're involved in a conflict, of course. And the service the radio station provides is important because it is a link, a bridge between home and where you are, and you are there to provide that entertainment. But I think you're a friendly voice and a reassuring voice of normality. Would that be fair to say?
I'll take normality. That sounds good to me. I think you're right. BFBS is far from unique in that we entertain and we inform, but our audience is unique, and that's the important part. I think over the years we've seen technology change, so the dependent on the only way to get messages out of the country or back in for the armed forces in the past was through BFBS. Now smartphones mean that you've got all of that connectivity, but what we do is we're able to do that connection, do that information. It's a soft sell, if you like. We're playing songs and then we're talking about things that interest the armed forces, and we're doing that 24/7. We're passing that information on. We're connecting the families. It's best summed up by, music is so emotive, and it's the best thing in the world. But if you hear a song and your partner or your family is listening to the same song at the same time, regardless of where they are in the world, you've got that instant connect there as well, haven't you? BFBS is a well-kent face and voice, in particular overseas. So we at the moment have around about 85% of those serving listen to BFBS on a regular basis. A lot of radio stations, any radio station, I think, would give their high teeth for that kind of figure. For a lot of people, they're probably more aware of it when they're served overseas than here in the UK. But what we do in the UK is really important as well. And what it does, Ian, is it breaks down that some of the myths as well. We find that we have a lot of interested civilians that listen in because they want to know what's going on. Veterans, want to know what's happening with the guys that they used to serve with. So I think we've got a key role there to fill.
And that's right as well, isn't it? Of course, you don't just go and serve in one place, and you could be in a battalion or a regiment that's stationed in one place, and then they move off. But obviously, your mates from before are still left behind, or vice versa. And it is keeping in contact, not just at home, but with your fellow pals who that could be serving and moving around the world. And obviously we know full well now that at the time of recording there's all the situation in Afghanistan brewing up. Of course, that's been a big part of life in the armed forces over the last 20 years as well, hasn't it? And over that time you will have been broadcasting over there too to those forces, of course, as well, which must have been particularly crucial, I think, at the height of the conflicts and what happened over there to keep that morale up, I suppose, and at times that must have been very difficult as well.
Yeah, I think you've got to approach it with sensitivity, and you're trying to find that balance of keeping that connection going. I remember phoning very early in the morning, like 5:30 in the morning, because of the difference with the times in Afghanistan, and doing link-ups with the guys, and some of them were out in forward operating bases, out in the FOBs, and trying to get them to do messages home for their families. And I know for a fact that those families took so much out of it. And while I talked about earlier on about technology changing, the smartphones meaning that they were able to do that, they weren't able to do it from there because they had to pass this satellite phone around, and you get this kind of crackly message coming back, and they've got 2 minutes, and they're getting wound up by their mates. That's the best thing about the military, and you'll have found it with the veterans in Erskine as well. It's that banter, and we all like to take the mickey out of our mates, but it's so much better in that military community, and it keeps them going. And I know for a fact that families who recorded the messages when they were getting them still listen back to them all these years on from the height of the Afghan conflict. You talked about the connection in Edinburgh is a great example of it. BFBS Scotland broadcasts from Dricon Barracks in Edinburgh, where we've got 3 rifles based. Now, 3 rifles recruit from the northeast of England. It was home to 1 Scots who recruit from the west of Scotland. They're currently in Belfast, in the Hollywood Barracks in Palace Barracks in Belfast. So BFBS Scotland and Northern Ireland, when we link up, which we do on a regular basis, they're able to hear the friendly, hopefully relatively friendly voice of me over in Belfast as well as in Edinburgh. There's no escape.
It is, and it is a service, of course, that's provided on behalf of the government, on behalf of the MOD as well. So you're not like a commercial radio station as such. You've got a contract with the MOD to provide this service, and obviously that is good because it shows that the government, the MOD, take this entertainment and this connection really seriously, and it's an important part, as much as an important part of the armed forces as everything else.
It really is. We are funded by the MOD, but it's really important to stress that we're impartial we're not there as a propaganda machine for the MOD. We will challenge the MOD. We will ask the hard questions as well. But ultimately, our aim is to get across to our audience, whether it's serving veterans or the interested civilians as well, is to get across the great work that the military do and highlight and spotlight. And again, what is really humbling is you'll speak to the guys and say, that's fascinating what you're doing. I want to speak to you about it. And they're just doing their job. They don't see it as fascinating because they're in that and they're doing it. But we want to get across. A lot of people listening to BFBS are bemused when we start talking about sporting opportunities. And you look at the recent Olympics and past Olympics, and you've got army serving personnel who represent their country at the Olympics, the Paralympics. And that's clearly the pinnacle of sport, but there's so many opportunities for those that serve to do sport, and perhaps that's something that's not always comes across when you look at the recruiting or you see the news stories on the 9 o'clock news, 10 o'clock news, whatever. So there's so many different aspects there to the military, and again, BFBS and with the MOD funding, we're able to do that as well.
We touched on the Paralympics, and of course the Paralympics gets underway this week, and already we're starting to see British medal winners, which is fantastic news. But of course, a number of those involved in the Paralympics are ex-servicemen and women who, obviously, they would rather probably not be in the Paralympics, but nonetheless, when you're served such bad fortune and injury that changes your life, to then really put your all into that. And carry yourself on and become a medal winner and really give yourself something to aim for and achieve that is a great thing. And we're seeing many ex-service personnel, aren't we, Mark, who are now reaching those heights and have changed their lives for the better despite the adverse circumstances they were presented with.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at JJ Chalmers, for example, who has found this new life through broadcasting, Strictly, Paralympics, Olympics as well. You've got the powerlifter Mickey Yule, who's from Scotland, who has done, and that desire, that passion, that drive, that determination, if you like, that is in so many of us, but in particular in that military ethos. Is still there, and it gives them something, as you say, to aim for, something to focus, and this whole new, pardon the expression, a whole new lease of life.
Yeah, and it's that, I think, for many people, it is easy to think, well, you've got a lot of choices, I suppose, you've got a few choices when something like that happens, and to really show that fight, and I suppose that's the fight that you have to be in competition, but obviously the fight that you have to show in the armed forces as well, to never give up and keep going and really put yourself through these tough circumstances and pull yourself through.
Yeah, I have a bit of a chuckle at times because one of the things we do is we promote all the charities and all the sponsored events that are going on. If I was to tell you that each Monday we probably get at least a dozen bits of communication, whether it's via Facebook, email, phone, whatever, and it's somebody that's doing this challenge. And 9 times out of 10, it'd be in the military. It's on a bike because they go everywhere that they possibly can on bikes. Following that, it's running. During the Euros, we had a guy who had swam the English Channel. He then cycled from Land's End to John O'Groats. He ran the first mile from John O'Groats back south in a full bomb disposal outfit.
Wow. And they're fairly heavy.
He ran, and this was the bit that caught my attention because it was when Scotland were playing England. He was then running from Scotland, he's English, he was then running from Scotland to England at the same time that the game was going on. And he did all this in the space of, about 10 days. I mean, it's superhuman. And that's happening all the time. There's veterans walking the West Highland Way to raise money for all the charities, including Erskine. We see it all the time. most of our military and most of our veterans want to be so active, and keep doing what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got the Sporting Senior Games taking place in September. It's a bit different, a bit more remote this year, so happening on an individual kind of basis, but that is happening through September, and I know that training is very much underway for that, and no doubt the Paralympics being back on the TV this next week will certainly up the ante there. But competition, no matter how old they are, and it could be in the 90s, 100s, they're there.
Absolutely. I mean, we covered it a couple of years ago, and I remember speaking to Ian, the chief exec, and him saying, he's blown away by just how passionate and how hyped up they get, and how competitive that spirit is. But I'll tell you what, they might be going kind of toe to toe or nose to nose, and they might be, but at the end of it, they'll be best pals, you know, and that comradeship continues throughout the life, and so much of that is about the military community, which is so different in so many ways from civvy life.
And as you say, it's that banter, and that's everything comes down to that. I'm finding, no matter who I've spoken to over the last few months, when we talk about the veterans and we talk about the things that are really important and the things that they miss when they're not part of the armed forces, and really why being at Erskine and being a resident at Erskine is an important thing, is because it brings that back. It brings that armed forces banter back that they get on a daily basis, and they can have a chat and around lunch, dinner, whatever it might be, and that kind of stuff continues, and that lifestyle is the important thing.
Yeah, and you'll see it on so many different levels as well. It's as high as tri-service, so the Army will take the mickey out of the RAF. The RAF traditionally stay in hotels where the Army are there, and all that kind of banter that goes on. And then it comes down to individual units as well, and who you served with or who you serve with, and everybody thinks, rightly so, that they served with the best and the most intense.
Yeah, if I was joining any of the armed forces, it would genuinely have been the RAF. But I think, the hotel argument is definitely a strong one, and for families as well. I mean, we find that communication with families and families, being able to keep up to date with what's happening around Erskine, but I imagine similar for BFBS. It's a very easy way for families to just have the radio on and keep in touch with also the banter, but also with what maybe is happening around the various forces wherever they may be stationed.
Yeah, BFBS's history goes back 78 years, and really that was the start of it. It was those family link-ups with back home and getting those messages back. That's never stopped. As I say, technology makes it perhaps a bit easier, but there's something special about hearing that message on the radio, hearing that connect. And we did it at Christmas there. We linked up with Radio 1, and there's so many of the messages going out on Radio 1 as well as on BFBS. And it's not just radio now, it's social media. Collington Primary School's our local primary school in Edinburgh. We do a lot with them. And at one point, I don't think it's quite as high now, but at one point it was something like 90% of the children in the school were of service families. Now, could you imagine being one of the 10% that wasn't? But, so we get them involved, and you get the pride of the parents who can't necessarily be there because mum or dad's serving overseas, but they're still able to get that connection with families.
It's a fantastic service, and of course long may it continue, and not just on radio, of course, TV as well. So it's it's a full multimedia service, of course, in the larger part with all the news and all that. We've got reporters embedded with troops and all that kind of thing. I know as well, because a couple of friends of mine have been reporters for BFBS in the past, and been to all sorts of scary places, hanging out the back of Chinooks and all sorts of things. So it's it can be quite a job for journalists as well.
It really is, and again, that impartiality is really important. There's privileged access in a lot of cases because we're reporting on our audience as well. News is crucial, but with news you've got to stay impartial, because as soon as you don't, then you lose any respect that anyone has. And you mentioned TV. We have Forces News there as well. We have Forces TV, but we also have social media, and social media, as everyone knows, has grown beyond anyone's expectations, and that gives us another platform as well, and another outlet. And I unfortunately this year there's no Royal Edinburgh military tattoo, for example, and I've got to mention it because I get wound up about it all the time, but the video that I did 2 years ago for all of the Royal Edinburgh military tattoo, with over 2 million views of this little 2-minute video, and it just, again, it shows you the power and lovely colour and sound, and but a great way of spreading the message of what the tattoo does. But again, at the same time, linking everybody back into this military audience and the military feel of things.
Well, thanks for joining us, Mark, and telling us a little bit more about BFBS. It's been great speaking with you. Where can we find BFBS these days? Because I think you're everywhere, aren't you? DAB, online, on all that kind of jazz.
Yeah, it is. I often joke on here. It's harder to miss. It's harder to miss us than it is to get us, because we are literally all over the place. So we're across the UK on DAB+. BFBS Scotland, however, broadcasts on FM in Edinburgh. Also Inverness, Fort George and Glencorse. We have DAB Plus in Glasgow. You can get us online at bfbs.com. You can download the BFBS app there. We've got 22 stations at the moment, Ian, 22 different methods of output. And as I say, that goes from Cyprus, Gibraltar, but we also now have our specialist stations as well, playing rock and indie music on BFBS Edge. We've got BFBS Beats, which is dance music. We've got Rewind for the slightly older. I feel more comfortable there for sure. And they're all there for a reason. They've not just been created. It's because there's that need and that desire to have that. And Scotland is a different audience from BFBS Catterick, for example, or Salisbury Plains. We have all of that as well. And again, through the coronavirus, where in different countries had different lockdowns, and it was really, really important that we had that connect. We were able to champion what the forces were doing on the likes of Rescript, for example, as well. And it, as I say, it's just about getting that message out there as to what the serving personnel are doing, keeping the civilians and indeed the veterans up to date.